Castlevania is a fantastic show, which I'll probably review in its own video later. But what you need to know is that it has fast action, it's vampires, it's bloody, it's gory, it's got a pretty good plot. Some seasons are better than others. I would say season 4 is probably one of the best. Season 1 is also great. So basically, Castlevania Nocturne has a lot to live up to because Castlevania was so successful, so popular, ran for 4 seasons. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty good. And so, excuse me, basically a few things. You need to have fast action that was fun and great to watch, and it also needed to have a decent plot, nothing too complex. Just keep me guessing, keep me interested, let everything fall together in an interesting way that benefits the action. And a few good twists and not be too stupid. It did feel grounded in the rules that it's set up for that universe. And so Castlevania Nocturne needed to just basically hit a lot of the same beats and maybe improve upon them a little bit. Well, did it do that? No, because a lot of people really did not like this show. It's only sitting around 50% audience score review on Rotten Tomatoes, even though the critics all loved it. To compare that with the first Castlevania show, audience score somewhere close to 80 or 90. So a lot of people didn't like it, and I think I know why. So basically, one of the characters in this, Annette, was actually race swapped. Apparently they changed her from a white person to a black person, and now everybody's upset. Race swapping is just a bad idea, no matter what political belief you hold, no matter what side you're on. Race swapping, it just doesn't make any business sense because everybody is going to get their panties in a bunch about it, and it's just not going to go well for you. It just gives more people, just gives your haters a reason to complain. I would say stick to making new, original, diverse characters like Miles Morales and Black Panther. They all do super well. So just stick to being original and you'll probably be all right. And so the setting of Castlevania Nocturne, it's basically very typical, set during the French Revolution. And basically, the rich people are all basically run by vampires. Most of them are vampires at this point. And the poor people are the heroes trying to overthrow the oppressive rich. And so, if you go back and you look at the history of the French Revolution, this is where the show kind of goes bad a little bit for me. Is the show woke? A little bit. It does use a lot of woke language, such as oppressor versus oppressed, and rising up and defeating oppression and freedom and all of that. If you actually know the history of the French Revolution, a vast majority of the people that were killed during that time, like they were just beheading people in the streets. It was basically the Great Terror or something like that. I forget what it was called. And a large portion of the people were killed were just the normal people that the revolution claimed to represent. And most of them were killed on not on suspicion of not being supportive of the revolution. So it was a very, very bloody time. And, there's a lot of nuance to these things. If you read the history of the French Revolution, yeah, the rich people were definitely screwing over the poor. And so it's not like nothing bad was happening and it was just some woke ideology that caused these people to rise up and start killing everybody. They genuinely were oppressed, genuinely were seriously afflicted. Now, that doesn't necessarily justify beheading everybody in the streets, but there's a lot of complex things on both sides of the French Revolution. Not something that I'm super familiar with. I just did a little digging, and I know it's a very nuanced topic. Unfortunately, the show Castlevania Nocturne doesn't really get into the nuances of the French Revolution. It does paint it pretty black and white. Rich people bad, poor people good. And it some of the dialogue hints at French Revolution going overboard and killing a lot of the priests and things like that. But it does tend to paint a lot of the revolutionaries as good guys. It doesn't really delve into the nuances of the French Revolution. And the problem with that is that it's not supposed to. It's a Castlevania show. That's not why I watch Castlevania. Castlevania is just there for good action, decent plot, and surprised me with a couple of bloody gut-punching twists. And it does do that. We're going to get to the good part of the show. And so to answer the question, is the show woke? Technically, Yes. Does that make it bad? No. It does use a lot of woke language, and I can understand, especially in the first 2 to 3 episodes of the show, you may feel like you're getting shortchanged with all the woke language. I would argue that those episodes aren't bad. They're just a little bit off from what you would be expecting, but the show does return to form after episode 4 and onwards. And so let's get into more about the characters. And so I thought the characters of this show were pretty good. They actually developed quite nicely. One of the things that I will say, if we go over to the Annette character, the show does feel like it pulls a bit of a switcheroo on you in the beginning, because we're in the first episode we're introduced to these two characters, Richter, and I forget the chick's name, but she's the revolutionary girl that's just painted as a good guy. And in the show, we're introduced to them, and you think that we get the beginning of Richter's, backstory in terms of him, his mother being killed by a vampire, and he carries the whip, assumingly, that Trevor Belmont carried. And so I can understand the audience feeling a little bit shortchanged, especially with episodes 2 and 3, because it's basically all about her. It's basically all about her, and we're introduced to this cool vampire. She's basically a minion of the Eagle Dark Lord coming through, but it's really Annette's show at this point, and she's from, I think, Colombia. She was a slave. She ran away, met another character named Edward, who shows up with her, and they end up teaming up with our two main characters. The show is pretty good, but you're feeling a little bit shortchanged because you thought it was Richter's story, and then it turns out to be more of Annette's story. I'm okay with subverting expectations and surprising people with good surprises of great new characters and things like that. But you want to make sure there's a difference between surprising your audience and betraying your audience. But fortunately, the show doesn't do that, because it ends up coming back to being Richter's story in the end. Once we get from episode 4 and onward, we really get to know more about Richter, and his character starts developing really, really quickly, and I really enjoyed that. And so by the time we get to episode 5 and 6, I really feel like all of the characters are pretty well developed, and I felt like everything was balanced out nicely. And so by the time we get to episode 5 and 6, I'm pretty happy with the character development across the board. I feel like everybody is in a good position to really give us a good showdown. And my goodness, let's talk about Edward for a minute. He was a normal guy that was partnered with Annette, and the show actually goes in new directions, where one of the demons that is Hellspawn or whatever, night creatures, thank you, that is he gets turned into a night creature, but he retains some of his old consciousness. So he's a night creature that isn't purely evil, and he has his own independent thoughts. And so the show does take us into new directions, which is great. And then it also does have a lot of gut punching moments. One of the other main characters, the mother of the main girl, her backstory is that her sister was actually captured and turned into a vampire, as you can see here. And so that really does hit you. I think it's in episode 5 that we learn that, or episode 4. Either way, that really is gut punching. And my goodness, once we get towards the end, really starting to feel good about all of the characters, but I wasn't ready for the actual gut punch of an ending. And this is where I think the show actually steps up it actually elevates the Castlevania narrative and actually hits you in a way that's a bit more vicious than what you are, typically expecting from Castlevania, because turns out that the priest is actually the father of the little girl that we saw earlier, the blonde, who's a revolutionary. It's always the Christians and the vampires that are evil. The vampires are pure evil, the Christians are corrupted, and the witches are, or the wizards are the good guys. To be fair, there's a lot of corruption in church history, so I can't necessarily fault the writers for playing into that, even though I am a Christian. I can't really get mad at the writers. There's a lot of corruption throughout church history. And so, yes, it's something that a woke writer would write, but I can't really be mad because it's also kind of accurate, right? And so I try not to read too far into these things. And so basically, it turns out that they want to take his daughter, and he basically says God was supposed to provide a ram like Abraham for Isaac. The mother of the daughter offers herself up in the daughter's place as the ram, and you get this really gut-wrenching scene where this good, noble character sacrifices herself, basically damning her soul, and becomes a vampire in place of her daughter to set her free. And the show ends that way. It ends with the main characters running away. The bad, evil witch lady that blocks out the sun with the eclipse kind of wins, and they run away, and they're on the hill, and one of our noble, great characters sacrifices herself to become a vampire. And it's like the way the scene is played out, it's so, it really hits you. Like, it's really gut wrenching. And so the finale of the show just elevates it to a whole new level. And so I would say this show has some good, some bad, the woke dialogue. But I would encourage you, while I don't think episodes 2 and 3 are bad episodes, they're just not necessarily what you're looking for. And it is another, from slavery to freedom story. And they did race swap a character in order to do that. So I understand why that would be a turnoff. But if you keep watching and you make it through to the end, I'd say the show is pretty darn satisfactory overall. I, as a Castlevania fan, am still happy, and I am optimistic about season 2. And so I hope season 2 brings the heat, gives us a big war, a lot of fights, and really pushes the Castlevania world into a new era, because that would be fantastic. We're doing a lot of material here that we haven't touched before. New ideas such as night creatures, being sentient and not wanting to be evil. One of the main characters giving themselves up to become a vampire. Lots of great stuff here. And so I'm excited for Castlevania. Now, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Did you like Castlevania Nocturne? Was it way too woke for you? Were you able to get through the woke part and end up enjoying the series overall like I did? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments down below.